Hello, and welcome to Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, formerly carried on the Starcom radio network, now carried on my YouTube channel, because, I just love getting the chance to get yelled at by you wonderful people when I do something wrong. You couldn't do that when it was on the radio, so yeah, this is terrific. Anyway, welcome back. It's been a little while since we've streamed. We are on to Chapter 8 of our Radical Book Club, Chapter 8 of Homage to Catalonia. And joining me is Bobby B. of the Mustache Mafia podcast. Bobby, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody, I'm Bobby B. of the Mustache Mafia podcast. I have been taking a break from doing content for a little too long, but I am back for this little thing, and I'll have some things in the work for this month and this year. Hopefully, I'll be annoying you guys with the dulcet tones of my voice a lot more regularly.
I think it's really interesting. I called this segment Radical Book Club because it's literally what we are doing. And then one of my favorite journalists, Robert Evans of Behind the Bastards, he just did a 2-part in-depth deep dive into the life of Nestor Makhno on his Behind the Bastards podcast. It was a reverse bastard. It was a hero podcast. But one of the things that they kept coming to was that Nestor Makhno basically just started off running a radical book club.
Hey man, you start small and then it works bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's what we're doing here. We have our own Radical Book Club, and hopefully hopefully things don't get so bad that we have to go the way of Nestor Makhno. But with the conditions that he had to live with, I really think it was probably the best possible response that one could have to those kinds of conditions.
Only if people come to the book club without doing a reading, and then.
Yeah.
Gulag.
Absolutely, straight into the gulag. Okay, or you get run over by the Tachanka.
Oh, jeez. that escalated quickly.
We've been doing Homage to Catalonia. This is the true. It sometimes gets filed under fiction, but it's the real life memoir of George Orwell, who went to Catalonia and fought in the Spanish Civil War against the fascists, along with a left Marxist unit called the POOM. And we're on to Chapter 8. So, Bobby, refresh my memory. What goes on in Chapter 8?
So, Chapter 8 is it's kind of the nature of this narrative a little bit. In that, I'm sorry, you guys probably just heard me close and open my liquor cabinet, but it's kind of the nature of this narrative that we get scenes of a lot of action, and then we get kind of the after effects of that action on Orwell and his comrades. And if you've been listening to this for any length of time or studied war in any serious way, that's really how warfare actually works. So I think that's a really great aspect of this book, even though narratively it does kind of tend to slow things down. So in this chapter, we're dealing with the aftermath of an abortive attack on Hueska, which listen to our last chapter because that was crazy. It went wrong in a lot of really interesting ways because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. This is a pretty short chapter. Last
chapter was pretty impressive. I mean, we had fighting, we had them trying to sneak in the rain. You pointed out that speaking in a low voice as opposed to a whisper is actually harder to hear from far away.
Did you try that out?
No, I haven't yet, but I probably should at some point because, my son's been everything's been in very loud voices around me lately. My son is 2, and you guys may hear him shouting in the background while we record this.
He's just proving me right. He knows.
Oh yeah, he totally knows. It's funny. He was at one point. He was just sitting there. He was yelling at the top of my lungs. My wife says, "What the world are you doing? What's going on?" He goes, "Scream."
Oh man.
So this was a crazy thing where they carried out the attack on the fascists, which turned out to not be the real attack. They were actually a diversion. They didn't know about it, and then had to retreat after taking that ground. But then the actual real attack wound up not succeeding, unfortunately.
Exactly correct, and that happens in warfare sometimes, especially in a siege. If you look back at the history of sieges, you're going to see that almost no siege of a city or fortified position is ever successful on its first assault. You're going to see multiple assaults, long periods of depriving them of supplies, which we're going to see in this chapter. They call it reducing a city for a reason, because you have to reduce the resistance for you to actually be able to carry out your military will. But that's the nerdy military science I bring to this conversation, kids.
Yeah, it's the great stuff that you can't get. Honestly, it's difficult. I really appreciate your perspective on this book, because most of the people who read this book are radicals who have not joined the military.
Yeah.
You've not only been in the military, but you've been in 2 campaigns abroad, if I'm not mistaken, and you have been in combat.
I took some vacation time, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the great things about this. All right, so let's go in. That's what happened last chapter, and this chapter we're sort of dealing with the fallout of that. So what's that like?
So the first paragraph is actually a wonderful flowery prose, literally, because he's noting that the days are growing hotter because it's summer, and the clusters of cherries and the roses are blooming, and the peasants behind the line, he can see them wearing wild roses in their hair. And they're hunting quail for subsistence. And something kind of interesting in this paragraph is he notes that it's a little bit unfair that only the male quails are caught. You can read into that a little bit because only the men are fighting, maybe. But it also kind of does show you something about peasants and people who live close to the land. They know that if they catch the male quails, the females will still lay eggs and replenish the population. So it's kind of like nature conservation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also, birds are horrible.
Yeah,
I raise chickens, and like you need like at least 6 hens per male bird, and they're born at like 50-50 capacity. So like an egg has about a 50-50 chance of being male or female. And then like it's really, basically nature is horrible to male birds.
Yeah. It really is. But the peacock gets to look awesome, so there's that.
The peacock does get to look awesome, though. Also, when the peacock pops out their feathers like that, that's basically they have a giant boner.
I knew that.
Yeah. And other fun peacock facts is they make amazing alarms because they scream at anything that enters anything they don't recognize. They just scream at it, like my son.
Oh man!
Full circle here.
Full circle. Continuity, canon.
Yeah, so he's an MRA for the quails. He's saying this is misandry.
Yep. He's making little fedoras for all of them, and they're reinforced by a group of Andalusians. You can check out a map of Spain to see exactly where they're from, and he's noting that they're mostly illiterate, and they don't even know what political party they belong to, which is something that all of the Spanish do. Mm-hmm. And they'd only know broadly that maybe they're communists, and that they're laborers basically that have been kind of conscripted to come fight. And that's kind of showing you the situation behind the lines, which we're going to get into in detail in the next chapter. But it also kind of shows you something that tends to happen in war. There's a great Western movie called Fistful of Dynamite, which I highly recommend anyone who's listening to this watch. But there's a great line in that where they're talking about revolution, and one guy says that like the people who read the books tell the people who don't read the books to go fight, and that's kind of exactly what's happening here. Is that these people were kind of dragged, and but they're extremely useful, these Andalusians, because they're extremely good at rolling up really awful tobacco into Estrés cigarettes.
Oh man, cigarette rolling, that is an art at times. I don't smoke anymore, except for the CBD. But I had a friend who used to roll his own cigarettes, like in the New York Underground. It always looks so cool.
It really does. I smoke cigars, and I do not have the dexterity to actually roll an entire cigar. I am not that cool. It would look like an awful spliff. But he notes going on that it's getting hotter, and 2 of the Englishmen he's serving with are actually laid low by sunstroke.
Oh my!
And that one of his biggest memories of that time is the heat, working half naked with sandbags. I'll read the little. I highlighted this. Excuse me. My salient memories of that time are of the heat of the midday sun and working half naked with sandbags, punishing one's shoulders, which were already flayed by the sun, and the lousiness of our clothes and boots, which were literally dropping to pieces, and the struggles with the mule which brought our rations and which did not mind rifle fire, but took to flight when shrapnel burst in air, and the mosquitoes, just beginning to be active, and the rats, which were a public nuisance and would even devour leather belts and cartridge pouches. So he's not in a great material condition here.
Nope, definitely not.
Something about that kind of interested me about more current events is the DoD put out a thing about a year and a half ago, the American Department of Defense, that is, where climate change and increasing global temperature is causing them to rethink loadouts for soldiers in future wars. Because even with training and conditioning, there's only so much weight you can carry for so long in extreme temperatures. Yep. And he's running into that as an Englishman because they're used to the extremely mild English climate and not a more intense Spanish summer. And I was thinking, like, wow, like if these guys were dropping out in the 30s in Spain, like imagine them in 115 in Iraq.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, not just that, but like, so people don't realize how much like heat does actually sap your energy. Like I remember early on the Appalachian Trail when I was hiking, like one of my first weeks, this was kind of midsummer. I was hiking along the Tennessee North Carolina border, and I'd only been doing it for a couple of days, and I had a black Under Armour shirt on that turned white, and it turned white from my own sweat.
Yeah, I've had salt crystals form on shirts from a couple things, and it's brutal. It really takes you out. The worst heat that I've ever actually encountered was at Fort Polk in Louisiana, which is where the film Tigerland takes place. If you guys like old Colin Farrell movies, but that's where they used to send guys to train for Vietnam, and it's one of the biggest war game centers in the United States. And the heat there in June was the most brutal thing. It made Afghanistan look like a Sunday school picnic living in that. Oh, wow. But yeah, it's a rough place. But heat casualties are a serious concern, even in modern warfare. So that's not a extraneous detail that he put in, that people were falling out from heat stroke.
Absolutely. Well, and you'll notice there was another detail that he put in there that was not extraneous, which was the rats.
Yes.
And that's another thing I remember from the AT. We even had a guy on the AT whose trail name was Weapons of Mouse Destruction. And he was crazy. Like he would carry traps with him and set them out all along, because you'd sleep in the shelter and all night the mice would be running up and down. There was even one guy who trained his cat to sit on the back of his backpack and travel with him. And it was great to have him around because like the cat would get rid of the mice throughout the night, and then it would just go on.
Jesus, that's awful. Oh man. I never really had to deal with rats at that level. Maybe it was the places I was, but I was in comparatively better conditions than Orwell is here most of the time. But he notes that the only casualties they're getting now are occasional sniper fire and sporadic artillery and air raids on Hueska. I assume he means fascist air raids on their positions surrounding Hueska.
Yeah. Which would be carried out by the Nazi Condor Legion, most likely. Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Franco had much of an air force.
No, he had to buy his planes at friendship prices, buy in air quotes, from the Nazis, and they supplied pilots and air crews.
And he had to get the fuel to fuel them. He got it provided on credit, the world's first credit card by Texaco, which was illegal, but they got away with it because rich people in the United States get away with everything.
My dad had a Texaco card, but he notes that the result of the assault that they had attempted on Huesca hadn't been carried off completely. That they had not managed to cut the road. Their goal apparently in the last assault was to cut the main supply route that was leading into Huesca. And they had set up positions on either side of the road, but it didn't cut it off completely. Their goal was to basically establish machine gun positions that would make it impossible to drive a truck across it. But the fascists
they could then starve the town out.
Starve the town. Well, not only starve the town out, but especially in modern mechanized warfare, if you think about what your troops are doing, even during a siege situation, they're expending resources. Like every day they're in the field. So that sniper is expending bullets. The guys who are skirmishing are expending bullets. Your trucks are expending fuel. Your guys have to eat and drink water, like you mentioned, food. So like in modern warfare, even more than in like sword and shield warfare, you really, really need supplies. Julius Caesar famously said, amateurs talk about tactics, but professionals talk about logistics. And there's a famous quotation, a saying that goes around the army today that's no bullets fly without supply. So you
Oh,
absolutely,
actually, it rings. It's got a nice ring to it.
it does have a nice ring to it. It's true too. But the deserters that are coming out of Hueska are reporting that they have a lot of munitions and very little food. So the the reports of the deserters being accurate might be up for debate, but
Mhm.
uh, if they run out of food, they can't fight anymore. But if they run out of munitions, it'll be much quicker before they surrender. And the fact,
Absolutely. And I should add, it makes sense that they're running out of food here because the area that was controlled by the anarchists
yeah,
was essentially the breadbasket of Spain. So when Orwell talks about people talking about the fascists being in a state of food deprivation, that is very, very true. Honestly, it may not be as bad as some of them say it is, but they're definitely having trouble with food. And it's always the funniest thing too, because whenever you start talking about anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, the first thing that comes out of reactionaries' mouths is, "Oh, communists just starve everyone. Everyone starves." And the fact of the matter is that's like the one thing the anarchists did better than absolutely anyone else, which was feeding people during the Spanish Civil War.
yeah, that's kind of a little funny quirk of history, isn't it? He does actually give us a figure of how many troops that they have at the siege at this point. He notes that it would have been impossible to take the city with the 15,000 ill-armed men who were available, and that later in June the government brought troops from the Madrid front and concentrated 30,000 men on Huesca with what he calls an enormous quantity of aeroplanes. I love his
Mhm.
British spelling, but still the town didn't fall, and that kind of shows you a little bit of a lesson about warfare. Uh, Another famous Clausewitz quote is that defense is the strongest form of warfare, but the only possibility of victory lies in the attack. But we see that Huesca is a well-located city. It's well garrisoned. They have plenty of munitions, and they're able to get enough food for their men to sustain themselves, if not be comfortable. So they have a much stronger position than the left forces that are besieging it, and that they need to bring in many more men than are actually in the city in order to take it. And that's something that you'll see repeated throughout like World War II. Whenever you see you as a rule, you want like 3-1 numerical advantage if you're trying to take a well fortified position. Just because,
I'm reminded of, I think, and I don't know if this is an official thing with the NYPD, but one of the things that was going around with Occupy that we kind of noticed, and I've seen it with other protests where people will be like, "Oh, this was happening," and the police didn't step in and do anything. And the fact is, from what I understand, police units are actually ordered not to confront crowds unless they outnumber them 2-1. Or have some other force
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 multiplier is the term.
multiplier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's good tactics on their part, frankly. If not, moral tactics.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't. What we saw in the last chapter is that with equal numbers, if they tried to overrun the trenches, they would have been gunned down. They very quickly wouldn't have had equal numbers. So
Mhm.
they need an advantage in that at this period with the tactics and strategies that were being employed, which are still basically World War I style tactics and strategies. You would need an enormous quantity of men to actually take a city. And just think about that for a minute, though. They have 15,000 human beings that are besieging this city. Uh, I mean, you probably have seen 15,000 people in one place, but there's a lot of people who might not have ever actually seen that many people in one place, and that wasn't enough. So they had to get 30,000 people to try to take the city with air support, and they couldn't do it. That's we're seeing the end of the old kind of individualistic conception of war, and we're seeing war on an industrial scale after World War I at this point. You would be hard pressed to find, for instance, in Napoleon's invasion of Spain, you'd be hard pressed to find many engagements in that war that had more than like 30,000 people involved on either side. So this is something that's historically very notable. And
If I'm not mistaken, just before this, there was a battle in World War One. I'm trying to remember exactly the name of the battle, but it was like 1.5 million Russians died in like a day.
yeah, that happened a lot during the war, so it's kind of hard to narrow it down. I mean, the sum, I think it was like 100,000 people on the first day.
Oh
Like
wow!
it's brutal what you can do with an industrial army.
Yeah.
But that kind of is the end of his tactical description of where he is. And then we kind of get into his reminiscing about his time in the militia, which is pretty interesting. I really liked the, maybe I'm a nerd, but I really liked the description he gave of the politics of the Spanish Civil War. And this is more of an intimate portrait of his life. I'll read a quote real quick. "I had joined the militia in order to fight fascism, and yet I had scarcely fought at all, had merely existed as a sort of passive object, doing nothing in return for my rations except to suffer from cold and lack of sleep. Perhaps that is the fate of the fate of most soldiers in most wars. But now I can see that this period in perspective, I do not altogether regret it. I wish indeed that I could have served the Spanish government a little more effectively, but from a personal point of view, the point of view of my own development, those first 3 or 4 months I spent in the line were less futile than I thought. They formed a kind of interregnum in my life, quite different from anything that had gone before and perhaps anything that is to come, and they taught me things that I could not have learned in any other way." And that is something that comes out of doing something like this. You did the Appalachian Trail. When you do something difficult, or you do something kind of extreme, in this case going to Spain to fight an anarchist militia, it teaches you things about yourself, and it teaches you things about the world that you really wouldn't kind of have learned just sitting at home. And it's very interesting to see that Orwell realizing this in retrospect, because at the time he wasn't enjoying himself. Obviously, he was half naked, dying from heat stroke. He was getting chewed up by rats. He was freezing in mountains. But he learns a lot of really important lessons about himself and about the world through this experience. And while I don't recommend that anyone go and join a militia to go fight, I do recommend that people kind of challenge themselves, at least kind of sort of like Orwell did.
I can echo that 150%. I am the man I am today because I did the Appalachian Trail. That there are so many things that changed as a result of basically putting myself in that crucible, that I probably am not even fully aware of all of them. And how much of my outlook and behaviors have changed in the way I approach life. And I assume it's very similar with you in the military also. You know, you get put into that kind of extreme situation and it changes you. And, you know, hopefully you come out of it for the better. I know I did, and you seem like you have.
Yeah, I'm pretty okay, which is a good thing. But not everybody can say that. But yeah, I would not recommend joining the military specifically for that reason. I would recommend trying to do something like you did. If you're thinking about joining the military, I would say that you should do it for ideological reasons, and that I'll leave it at that. But because this isn't a recruitment commercial. I know a friend who's a recruiter. If anyone wants his phone number, he needs to make his quota, guys. No, I'm kidding. Wrong audience.
Yeah, you're gonna get a bunch of. There's gonna be a ton of angry leftists coming after me there.
I'm kidding.
You're not being dialectical.
Guess I'm not. Sorry, guys. Gosh, I lost my place here too. Dang it. I did it to myself. But he notes that he's kind of stumbled into the only place in Western Europe where the political consensus and disbelief in capitalism were the norm instead of the opposite. And that in Aragon, he was quote, among tens of thousands of people, many though not entirely of working class origin, all living at the same level and mingling in terms of equality. In theory, it was perfect equality, and even in practice, it was not far from it. There is, in a sense, in which it would be true to say that it was experiencing a foretaste of socialism, by which I mean the prevailing mental atmosphere was that of socialism. Many of the normal motives, civilized life, snobbishness, money grubbing, fear of the boss, etc., had simply ceased to exist. So it's kind of funny that this extreme civil war, this awful conflict, has kind of actually brought out like exactly what he's looking for, and that this experience, far from kind of like terrifying him about socialism, which is Orwell's reputation kind of in the modern culture, it actually instills in him even more of a desire to see socialism implemented, which is to say like the democratization of society and the means of production, and to flatten what he perceives as unjust hierarchies that are endemic to the capitalist societies that he's coming from. We always get this reputation of Orwell as he's the anti-socialism guy, but you really need to read this book to understand what he's really criticizing in his famous works is not socialism itself or left politics in themselves. It's like totalitarianism. It's the politics of exploitation, not from capitalists, but from authoritarian personalities that you really don't want to put in charge. And we're going to see the consequences of those personalities coming into power in the next few chapters.
Absolutely. Now, this was actually funny. So on our last, there was a guy commenting on our last one, and I know that he didn't actually read this book. He just heard Jordan Peterson talk about it, but it was that Orwell wrote a book, and one of the things that he wrote in this particular one was the title escapes me, but basically he was in one of the chapters of it. He was commenting on the fact that he had joined a miners' union. And he found that there were socialists who didn't so much like the poor but hated the rich, and that's literally just what he talked about.
I saw it too.
And so dude leaves the thing on there, and I was just like, okay. So first off, that's one chapter in a giant book. Second of all, when Orwell ended Animal Farm, he didn't say like the Animal Farm revolution was worse than the farm and they shouldn't have had a revolution. He said it was the same.
Yeah, the pigs become humans at the end. They become furries, basically.
Yeah, they reverse furries, skinnies.
Yeah. Skinnies, yeah, I guess. They do.
Yeah, and so, but like this is what comes from like Orwell being from one, people take Homage to Catalonia, which we are reading right now, which is a memoir. It's a primary source on the Spanish Civil War, and they shelve it in the fiction section. And partially that's people being stupid, but I also think it's some people trying to keep this hidden. Because again, like when you breathe the free air of equality, like I did with the Appalachian Trail and like I did with Occupy Wall Street, it's tough to put that genie back in the bottle. Once people experience that type of life, people want to keep it. And they don't want to go back to the hierarchical capitalist way of life.
No, they don't. And, it's funny you should bring up Jordan Peterson, because I thought of him immediately when I read this quote that I highlighted specifically for him, actually. It was, I am well aware that it is now the fashion to deny that socialism has anything to do with equality. In every country in the world, a huge tribe of party hacks and sleek little professors are busy, quote unquote, proving that socialism means no more than a planned state capitalism with the grab motive left intact. But fortunately, there also exists a version of socialism quite different from this. The thing that attracts ordinary men to socialism and makes them willing to risk their skins for the quote-unquote mystique of socialism is the idea of equality. To the vast majority of people, socialism means a classless society, or it means nothing at all. And it is here that those few months in the militia were valuable to me. For the Spanish militias, while they lasted, were a sort of microcosm of the classless society. In that community where no one was on the make, where there was a shortage of everything but no privilege and no bootlicking, one got perhaps a crude forecast of what the opening stages of socialism might look like. And after all, instead of disillusioning me, it deeply attracted me. The effect was to make my desire to see socialism, words are hard, kids, established much more actual than it had been before. Partly, perhaps, this was due to the good luck of being among Spaniards who, with their innate decency and their ever-present anarchist tinge, would make even the opening stages of socialism tolerable if they had the chance. So I read that and I immediately thought of Jordan Peterson when he talked about the slick little professors. There's so many of them, too, now. We've talked at length in other casts about like the culture industry. And there is an entire like industrialized process now to turn exactly what Orwell, not Jordan Peterson, is talking about out. And Peterson is a result of that industry. He's not like a brilliant intellectual.
No, I mean, Peterson, he's occasionally had some interesting things to say, in my opinion, on when he sticks to what he's good at, which is
Jungian psychology, I guess.
Jungian psychology, and that's pretty much it. By the way, just because we are on Jordan Peterson can eat my whole kielbasa. Thank you very much.
I saw that immediately. That was great. Good work, commenter. You win the internet today.
Absolutely. That's the best comment I've seen in quite some time. But this is, again, we were talking earlier about Orwell and how he is misremembered sort of on purpose as an anti-socialism figure because of 1984. And the thing is that he wrote 1984, and we'll see as we get into this, because he lived through the purge of the POOM. Spoiler, what is eventually coming, and we will get to that chapter, is the POUM is going to be declared a fifth column of Franco, secret fascists, and purged by the PSUC, by the Stalinists, and Orwell has to flee Spain while this is going on, while this state is setting itself up, because he and everyone else in his Marxist unit have been declared enemies. And that's really where 1984 came from. So people, again, try to take that criticism of a specific thing, totalitarianism, and project it out. And they do it in like the sneakiest way. Like Orwell literally said in one of his things, like, every serious word that I have penned in my lifetime, and I'm paraphrasing here, has been against totalitarianism, and they cut that quote off right there. But if you keep reading that sentence, it says, and for democratic socialism, as I understand it.
Yeah, it's amazing what people will do to expropriate people. I remember in college I actually wrote a paper about Che Guevara and how he's been the expropriator has ironically been expropriated by capitalism to sell an image of rebellion to people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what's called. So interestingly enough, on that, I was on what was it called? HuffPo Live or HuffPost Live, and I was brought on because I was with Occupy Wall Street, and I met the artist who created that image of Che Guevara, and it was because Urban Outfitters had taken that image and were selling like a Che Guevara shirt, and this pissed off Thor Halvorson, who I actually like Thor because he's changed a bit since these days. Yeah. But this pissed off Thor Halvorson, who's like, "How dare you?" From Human Rights Watch, like, "How dare you lionize this murderer, Che Guevara?" Yeah. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, the freaking Golden Dawn is actually like in our streets in New York. Freaking fascists are coming. This was before the alt-right or anything, and you're sitting here whining about a Che Guevara T-shirt. What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, it's really funny how people don't prioritize things.
No, they don't. But I want to get this out real quick beforehand. So this is what's called recuperation.
Yes.
Recuperation is the process by which society takes radical ideas and radical movements, absorbs them and regurgitates them in a way that they are not dangerous to the powers that be. A great example of this, honestly, is anarcho-capitalism, and right libertarian ideology in general. And you can look up, there's a great essay at Exiled Online. It's called like Google, it's called like Fools, Finks, and FBI Stooges or something similar to that.
That has to be from the 50s.
Oh yeah. Well, no. It's from like the 2000s, but
somebody actually used the word Fink. That's why.
Yeah. Well, the Fink is Richard Fink, who is a founder of the right of like right-wing libertarianism. But like they go into that, like how the FBI was instrumental, and they have the documents on there. Like the big really creepy thing is this was back when the Yippies were active. I'm the last Yippie, so I was interested in this. This is how I came about it. I was searching for stuff about the Yippies, and like what wound up happening was that there was this flyer that started circulating with a picture of Richard Nixon, who was president at the time, with a gun to his head. And it said it came from the Hunter College Libertarian Alliance, and it was like, the only dope worth shooting is Richard Nixon. And this flyer, nobody knew. It was like hey, we're the Yippies, come and arrest us. Here's our phone number. This was, of course, handed over to the J. Edgar Hoover FBI, and in released documents, the FBI said, no, we don't care about this. We don't want any information on the Hunter College Libertarian Alliance, which is what Samuel Edward Konkin III, SEK3, came out of. And this big, along with like the Koch-funded right-wing anarchists and right-wing libertarians, they all came out of this Hunter College Libertarian Alliance, which is almost definitely a psyop, because the obscenely paranoid FBI found a flyer that suggested people kill the president and did nothing about it.
Like we said at the beginning, big things from small.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So
I
yeah,
actually didn't know that. I only knew about Maury Rothbard explicitly saying that he was
not
expropriating the term libertarian.
yeah, stealing the term libertarian, and then he was like, "Oh, I'll steal the term anarchist too," because apparently stealing from anarchists works really well. So, and on that note, by the way, I want to go back to Marcos. They don't win. I'm sorry to tell you that the socialists fell in the Spanish Civil War.
Spoiler alert. Like,
Yeah, and then also what we have here, die. I know you're going to try to pronounce it. Isn't he on a beat and salt only died? He was. His
allegedly.
daughter. Yeah,
I don't believe they were actually doing that.
Yeah, he probably just said he was, but it was like that lion diet thing that his daughter was promoting.
It's super disturbing.
Yeah,
like, that whole thing is a long rabbit hole to go down. Of like, you would need another Jungian psychoanalyst guy to like tell you what's going on.
Well, didn't you hear that his daughter? It's the weirdest thing with Peterson because he's so afraid of socialism, but he covers his house in like Stalinist propaganda.
Yeah,
and he says like it's to remind himself. Like I don't cover my place with stuff that freaks me out. And his daughter wound up like being like the baby mama for
like a Stalinist or something,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
like a Stalinist pickup artist. Like Peterson, I just gotta say, like karma.
Yeah, it has to be like if anything exists in that, and any profound force exists in that family, it would have to be karma. It is weird because you don't see left people doing that. You guys can't see where I live in my disembodied voice right now, but I do not have any Nazi stuff hanging up. I don't have any Republican Party posters in my house. I guess the closest thing I have to right-wing propaganda is I have a couple copies of Hayek on my bookshelf.
Hayek's worth reading on occasion. Yeah. Just so you understand his terrible arguments.
Yeah, basically.
But I don't keep right-wing propaganda around to remind myself of what I hate. I don't keep propaganda around because propaganda freaks me out in general.
But I don't keep things around to hate. That's kind of something that separates the left from the right, in general. But getting point. Yeah, it kind of does. But getting back to the book a little bit.
Oh wait, right. There's one thing because there was something that I wanted to mention beforehand. No, you're right. It's just it flipped in and out of my head. So the Che Guevara issue.
Yeah. Oh, you know that. Sorry. One thing. You know that image is actually taken from a memorial service he was at.
Really?
Yeah, there was a munitions ship that exploded in the harbor, and
he was at the memorial service.
That was the look that he was giving.
That's crazy. Yeah. But I met the artist who I think is James Fitzpatrick or Jim Fitzpatrick, who is an Irish artist. He's the one that created that original image, and Urban Outfitters had to pull their T-shirt line because he contacted them and was like, "I'm going to sue the crap out of you if you keep selling this." He has been working to, I don't know if it's happened by now, but he's been working to turn the rights for that over to Che Guevara's daughter. So
that's nice.
Yeah, it is being and also verbally he told me Occupy Wall Street can use Che Guevara's image on anything we want. He made that promise to me.
That's dope. I'm actually going to send you something along these lines. Allegedly, if you go back far enough, Che Guevara, his family is actually of Irish descent somehow. Really? Allegedly, but the Irish are super bad about claiming that everybody's Irish. And I say this as somebody who's very half Irish myself. And this is actually a picture. Crud! Come on, I'm gonna send it to you on the Discord because it's not working on the Facebook Messenger. Okay. But this is actually a picture that was that I took, or that my cousin took. And it's in County Cork, and it's a memorial to Che there that they've kind of expropriated for the same kind of touristic voyeurism.
Okay, hang on. I'm in the thing on my phone here. I have a message from you.
Yeah.
Oh my.
It is really funny. In
my son's veins flows the blood of Irish rebels. I've got to. Okay, at some point, I'm gonna.
Use that. Feel free.
I wish I could do a screen share right now on this thing.
Yeah,
just you guys have to see this. It's the weirdest thing.
It really is. I also have a somewhere in a box. I have a bottle of Shea Cola that I got in South America.
Oh, he has his cola. Well,
He has a cola, yeah.
So anyway, I want to bring that up, but the other thing that I wanted to bring up before we go any further, and this will tie us back into Homage to Catalonia, is you remember the people at the beginning of the chapter that came in and they're like, we don't know what political party we are. I think we're communists.
Yeah.
This is what's really important for people to understand. And when they talk about anarchism, it's something people will say sometimes to put down anarchism, is that it is a movement of peasants. And in a way that very much is, because both in the Ukraine and in Spain, where the peasantry was still a thing, anarchism really took off in the biggest ways that it ever has, because the way anarchists behave is the way medieval peasants tended to behave. Absent of the Lord and everything, the peasantry very much was a heavily egalitarian force based upon mutual aid and mutual debt and common property. And they used the commons, and of course, when private property was instituted, it was the clearing of the commons. We have the laws that created this situation. So anarchism, in a lot of ways, makes intuitive sense to peasants. And it may make intuitive sense to me because my family, at least as far back as I can trace it on my mother's side, like we were peasants in the Carpathian Mountains, and so the fact is that politics doesn't go the way people seem to have this idea that everybody has the right political ideology in their head, and therefore that politics gets implemented. But politics in reality tends to be people doing what they feel comfortable with, when they get the opportunity to do it. And so in a lot of ways, people will say to me like, oh, sit there and plot out every aspect of your new anarcho-communist society for me right now.
Right.
The point is to create the conditions where people can build socialism and can build communism in a way that makes sense to them, as opposed to, prescriptively tell them, okay, do this, 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 and this.
Right. And that's kind of something that's interesting about reading like theory, is that you want to read theory if you can, and you can tolerate it, because a lot of theory is really boring, and I'm going to warn you guys about that way in advance before you ever crack open a copy of Capital. But when you get a framework like that, especially reading, say, Marx or Che Guevara is actually a good example of this. You get ideas that like these are immutable truths, like the sacred texts kind of thing. But also politics changes over time. And Che kind of ran into that when he went to Bolivia. I saw somebody writing in the comments, Bolivia hates Ireland, confirmed. But it's kind of funny. But Che Guevara, spoiler for Che Guevara, guys. Che Guevara died in Bolivia because he went over to Bolivia, and one of the things that he ran into was he thought he would start a peasant revolution, but there wasn't a significant peasant class for him to really rally. And Fidel Castro cut him off from aid, and there's all kinds of other shenanigans that went on, and the CIA was after him. So, but things had changed, and he hadn't recognized that, and it ultimately cost him his life. And you kind of have to do that when you're reading theory, is to realize that, like, say the Spanish Civil War isn't the United States in 2020. You have to realize that, like, when Marx was writing Capital, that was like a very different stage of capitalism than the neoliberalism that we're dealing with, even though a lot of the principles still apply. So that's kind of like my little warning to you guys before you start reading theory, if you haven't already. If you have, thumbs up.
You don't want to prescriptively nail something down. Like, there's one thing to talk about ideas, but it's another to see how things will work themselves out in practice. And I mean, that's kind of been my approach to things in general. And people use it to try to attack anarchists, like the fact that we don't have this 50-point plan on exactly what everyone's going to have to do. It's very oftentimes like, well, you'll get criticism like, what are the universal laws of anarchism? Like how exactly will property work everywhere at all the time? They're just imagining our current society with its state structure and with its military and police and hierarchy of command and obedience, but now suddenly they don't have their house.
And the famous quote is that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that we have a very short attention span, especially like my generation. I'm an older millennial, I guess. And we expect, when we talk about these things, people expect it to be done in like 5 years. And that's just not how things work.
No, it's
Well,
certainly not.
the kind of things we're talking about are decades long projects, if not
Yeah.
centuries.
But I did want to get into that. And I think that, there's something very important about those peasants not knowing what party they're in, and not even really knowing that they're communists. But you see that they're still committed to the war effort here. They're still committed to defeating the fascists. So on that note, let's get back to the chapter here. I'm sorry for the Che Guevara shaped hole we just jumped down.
I thought it was a good talk, but he talks about something for the rest of the chapter basically that I really sympathized with, is that the whole period that he was at war on the line. He said he was on the line for 115 days. Typical U.S. Army deployment, if you know anybody who's in the Army, is about 10 months. So it's a pretty short deployment for his first time on the line, but it's 115 days in combat the whole time, so that's a little nuts. But he said the whole period stays with him with what he calls curious vividness. And he lives over incidents that might not be worth recalling. He talks about like ducking in trenches with his friends, grins, making fun of the fascists, little talks around cauldrons of stew, and that's true. When you go to war, it sticks with you. You don't live through it once, you live through it like every day for the rest of your life. And the quote that I wanted to kind of single out here that I think really applies to us nowadays, that I think we should all kind of think about. It's a short paragraph. He says he's remembering a shell comes screaming over. Children of 15 fling themselves on their faces. The cook dodges behind the cauldron. Everyone rises with a sheepish expression as the shell plunges and bombs 100 yards away. That kind of resonated with me because most of the fire I took was indirect fire. It was artillery. But what stuck out to me was he says children of 15. And this is going to be a little heavy, guys, so I apologize. But imagine that for a minute. Seeing children of 15 duck from artillery fire. Imagine being the child of 15. Everyone thinks they're tougher than they are at 15. I certainly did. And imagine being 15 though, and having somebody shoot artillery at you to kill you. Imagine you're one of those guys and the shell doesn't miss, and you have to see a 15-year-old child or a friend torn apart by artillery. You don't live through that once. You live through that every day for the rest of your life. You're not the same after it. And I'm okay. I'm doing very well, but not everyone who lives through that does. And I think it is kind of, you mentioned before we kind of went live that it's kind of impossible not to mention what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. We have, and I'm going to be a little less than generous right now. We have cowards and I would say traitors in this country who are advocating for watching those 15-year-old kids get torn apart by bullets and bombs in a civil war for a failed reality show host. And I want you guys to know that, like, even it's not going to come to a civil war in the first place. It's laughably absurd. But I want you guys to know that if you're thinking about that kind of violence, that the people who live through that aren't going to live through it just on that day. They're going to live through it forever. The country would live through it forever. It would be a stain on our soul forever. And it's not something that you want to happen. That when these heroic people went to war against fascism in Spain, they were trying to stop pure evil basically from taking over their country, in so much as pure evil can exist. And they had no other choice. We live in a very imperfect democracy in this country. I think you'll agree that it's extremely imperfect. But we have the ability to avoid this, and we have to do everything in our power to avoid that. And that's my little heavy-handed thing about Orwell's recollections. There are funny recollections, though, too. I'll raise your spirits a little bit. I'll remember for the rest of my life. I lived in a three-man shoe, which is if you ever see a storage pod, the ones they put on the trucks. That's kind of what you live in Afghanistan, with like three guys. And I'll always remember putting my memory foam mattress down on a wood frame that I built to avoid using the army mattress. Thank you, Daddy Bezos, for sending me my memory foam mattress. I'll always remember that there was this dude who had the worst flatulence of anyone on the planet. Like he lived on the bottom bunk. My friend Warren lived on the top bunk, and I lived by the window of the storage pod. And one night Warren just went running out of the room And I was like, what's up? He's like, you'll see in a minute. And I started choking. And I'll always remember that, you know. And I won't bring it back down with any of the horrible stuff that we saw, but that there's things like that you remember. And if you're trying to make those kind of memories, don't do it with warfare. Don't do it with the destruction of human life. You can do it so many other ways. But it's interesting for me to read that Orwell kind of went through the same thing. And I felt like it was responsible to kind of try to avert violence.
Absolutely. No, that's really important. It's one of the reasons why I constantly say never go full accelerationist.
Yeah, exactly.
Because one, it doesn't work, guys. It doesn't work. I know there's a section of you leftists out there. There's people probably watching this video thinking if things just get so bad that people can't take it anymore. No, that's not what happens. What happens is like if you're aiming for a revolution, if one, you shouldn't be aiming for a revolution. You should be aiming to avoid a revolution, and then when you get forced into it, then you do the revolution as much as you can.
Yeah.
Hang on, we have a comment here. Turns out war is bad. Marco.
Yeah. Like, you just saved us like an hour of discussion, bro. Thank you. War is bad.
Yeah, but like. You fight as hard as you can for as sane and compassionate and functional a world as you can for as long as you can. And when your hand is forced, like something with revolution, it needs to be genuinely forced. You don't want to rush headlong into it like these freaking idiots are for their stupid failed reality show president with holes in his brain.
Yeah.
Trump, like this whole thing, and I'm going to do a stream about this soon, maybe even after we finish here. But I have protested like at the Capitol. I was there multiple times. There's a picture of me holding my big black and red class warfare bring it sign on the steps of Congress, you know. And I remember we were there, we were chanting money is not free speech. Might have been on it was on the steps of the Supreme Court. I protested out in front of the congressional building. I've dealt with the DC police, which I liked much better than the NYPD.
They're actually for a major metropolitan police force.
Yeah,
pretty okay.
They're fairly competent.
Yeah.
Like what, again, a cab, but like there's worse, the ones that you have to deal with.
There's degrees.
Yeah. Watching these idiots like storm Congress, the woman getting herself shot in the throat. Again, I don't think she deserved to die. But she did rush. From what I've heard from people on her own side who were there with her, the officers' guns were drawn and she ran at them. Again, I don't think they should have killed her. I think they should have used less than lethal ways of putting somebody down right there. But a woman is dead because this idiot can't accept defeat and has gotten all of these other idiots roped into running at Congress. And I'll tell you, there's a photo that I just shared on my Twitter, and it's of a guy out in tactical gear that he bought, and he's carrying with him a bunch of plastic zip ties. These are this kind of zip tie. This was what was used to bind my hands by the NYPD. And this guy's not a police officer, and he's heading to the freaking Capitol with those zip ties.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and people are going to say, "Oh, it's corrupt politicians. He's looking to arrest corrupt politicians." Yes, on behalf of an even more corrupt politician, perhaps the most corrupt politician in American history, and that is saying a lot. So there was absolutely nothing good about what these people did yesterday, I was really hoping that we would be at the chapter. Maybe we'll be there soon when the fighting breaks out.
That's the
next chapter. When the fighting breaks out over the May Days, because that's a crazy chapter. But I instantly thought of that when I saw this. So that's my little rant on the stuff. I'll probably be streaming about it immediately after we're done with this chapter here. So if you guys want to tune in for that, as I talk about that, I'll also answer questions with my protester knowledge. But yeah. So is that the chapter? Or do we have some more, Bobby?
He talks about he sets up the next chapter in that he says that they're being taken off the front, and then 25 April after what he calls the usual mañanas. They get relieved. They pack up their kids, hand over their rifles, and he goes back to Barcelona. And he ends the chapter with the line, and after that, the trouble began. So fighting in literal trench warfare wasn't the trouble. The trouble was when he went back behind the lines.
Absolutely.
And little primer. Go ahead.
By the way, real quick, mañana, because we didn't talk about this. This was something that Orwell noted about the Spaniards. Mañana means never. I don't want to do it. And it's one of the cool things, honestly, about the Spaniards is the mañana. It's infuriating to Orwell. And it would probably be infuriating to me, a New Yorker. But also, I love that about them. And it's one of the reasons why I think fascism and totalitarianism did not take in the Spanish culture, because it very much is like there's a real passionate savagery to Spaniards, but also there is a very human, taking the siesta while both sides are shelling each other, and then they just stop and take the siesta in front of the frustrated Russians that had been sent. Probably World War I veterans.
The Iraqis, and to an extent the Afghanis that we would deal with, they say "Inshallah," which means like if God wills it. In the same way, it means I'm not going to do what you're telling me. I have a friend who's dealing with it. He's over in the Middle East right now, and he's like, it's infuriating him because he knows it's not going to get done. So I can sympathize with that.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll also be doing something on the DC thing. I'm still a little really angry about that because DC. I lived in DC for the better part of 2 years, so that's like a very close city to my heart, and that was infamy.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't, if you've got the time, we can end this broadcast here and I'll do another one and we can talk through this. Burqa Inshallah. I think that
yeah, so I think that means that he's not going to wear the head covering.
Oh, not going to wear the head covering.
No. My Arabic is worse than my English, and that's saying something.
So, all right. Well, thank you guys. This has been Homage to Catalonia, chapter 8. We're going to be doing chapter 9, and that's when the trouble starts. So the next chapter is going to be freaking nuts. Bobby, do you want to plug your pluggables before we go on to the next stream?
Yeah, I'm Mustache Mafia on YouTube. I am Mustache Mafia on SoundCloud. I have not been posting there, but I have a thing that I'm editing that I'll be putting up soon. I'll probably be doing some more stuff this weekend. I am also Mustache Bob 2 at Twitter, and I think Brenton's probably linked me in the description. So if you want to reach out and yell at me about something that I've gotten wrong, feel free. I will probably read it and ignore it. But I might respond to it, and then we might have a dialogue. So parasocial relationship, guys.
and also to all the people who are going to comment on this video without watching it and without reading Orwell, that Orwell was anti-socialist and that he changed his opinion on socialism. No, he wrote a freaking essay. It's basically titled "Why I Joined a Socialist Party," where he explains explicitly, like, one doesn't just be a socialist in their head. You have to actually be a socialist and do socialism, and that it is a choice ultimately between socialism and fascism.
and nor did he, over the course of his literal entire life, write a foreword to this book denouncing socialism.
No, certainly not. And not only that, but he wrote that a year after the book that Jordan Peterson claims was him denouncing socialism and changing his mind was published. So no, Orwell absolutely was a socialist. He was a socialist his entire life. Shut up. You're boring. Go away.
Peterson read about as much of Orwell as he read of Derrida, which is to say none.
Absolutely nothing. He just, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. One of these days, I hope Peterson crashes hard enough that I can debate him on Modern Day Debate. That would be amazing.
I would pay him his speaking fee to actually debate him. I would literally do it. I have the cash. If anyone who knows Jordan Peterson is listening to this, I literally have his exact speaking fee in liquid cash that I will pay him to debate me.
If you could pay that to me for a copy of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse too.
I could do that, but that wouldn't hurt Jordan Peterson's feelings.
No, you're right, and we do really want to hurt Jordan Peterson's feelings. I don't know though. If Swaza becomes big enough, he does love freaking out about fairy tales in the media. So,
oh yeah, you know what? He might do that. Yeah, well, we should send you. You should send him a copy of your book.
Send him a copy of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse and just like flip. I could stick a little like sticky note in there with me flipping him off.
No. Tell him that his work inspired it and ask him to do a review.
Oh, that would be hilarious.
Yeah, this is chess, my friend, not checkers.
It's a good point. All right. Well, I will catch you later, Bobby. By the way, for those of you who are following Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, we actually. Oh, and also big news. I have closed on an artist for the Durruti comic series.
Oh, dope.
So yeah, that's happening. And the dude is Spanish, and he's super excited to do it. So I'm really looking forward to this. I reached out to him, and he was like, he's like, oh my God, I've got friends who are in the CNT. I really want to tell Durruti's story. Here's my art. I drew these pictures of Durruti just right now, and I'm just like, okay, I think I'll work with this guy. So it's really exciting. All right, I'm going to end this broadcast. Those of you who are watching, if you want to tune back in, we will be talking current events about the riots in DC and the attack on the Capitol.